The documentary opens in silence, the kind that feels deliberate. The Ridgway home stands still, the faint hum of cicadas the only sound in the suburban dusk. A narrator's voice cuts through the stillness, soft yet sharp. On the evening of October 12th, 2018, the Ridgway family vanished without a trace. No struggle, no witnesses, no sign of departure. Police body cam footage flickers, capturing half-open doors, a plate of half-eaten pasta, and a living room lamp still burning. It's as though time simply stopped mid-breath. The camera pans slowly toward the family portrait on the wall. 4 smiling faces frozen in their own illusion of normalcy. The voice continues. What began as a welfare check soon turned into one of the most disturbing investigations in county history. By morning, the Ridgway disappearance dominates local news. Detective Duval stands beside a deputy at the edge of a wooded road, where a silver sedan sits abandoned. Its hazard lights blink like a dying heartbeat. Inside, the air smells faintly of perfume and stale coffee. 2 travel mugs in the cup holders, a single earring glinting on the passenger seat. The narrator's voice overlays the scene. Their car was found less than 2 miles from home. No fingerprints, no footprints, no sign of struggle. The silence feels heavier than violence, as if the world itself conspired to erase them. Detective Duval returns to the Ridgway residence later that evening, reviewing the security footage collected from nearby homes. The grainy images flicker. Lila walking home from school, Thomas mowing the lawn, Eleanor carrying groceries. Moments of absolute normalcy, now heavy with implication. The footage stops abruptly 2 nights before their disappearance. The narrator intones, "What happened between that final recording and the night they vanished remains one of the case's most haunting mysteries." The investigation team expands their search beyond the home. Drones sweep the woods. Divers explore a nearby lake, and volunteers comb through trails with dogs. Each day that passes tightens the noose of uncertainty. The narrator's tone turns quieter. The Ridgways weren't the first family to vanish from this region, but they were the first whose home remained untouched, as though someone wanted the world to remember the setting, not the people. A map of missing persons dots the screen, and all trails seem to point toward the forest's heart. 3 days later, the case takes a darker turn. The team finds a shallow pit behind the Ridgway home, half covered by leaves. Inside lie fragments, a burned photo frame, a melted watch, and children's crayons fused together by heat. Detective Duval kneels beside the hole, her flashlight trembling slightly. The narrator's voice lowers. Evidence suggested the family never left the property, but what the investigators couldn't explain was the source of the burn marks found in soil that had never been touched by fire. The frame fades to black as the wind picks up through the trees. Detective Duval sits in her office as rain lashes against the window, the hum of fluorescent lights filling the silence. On her desk, a dozen photographs of the Ridgway family stare back at her, each one a fragment of a mystery that refuses to resolve. Forensic results came back clean, the narrator explains. No foreign DNA, no signs of forced entry, and no indication of anyone leaving the property. Duval exhales, her pen tapping the table. When the facts contradict reality, she murmurs to the camera, you start questioning the definition of real. The investigation expands. Officers retrace the Ridgway's final week, interviewing neighbors, co-workers, and classmates. One neighbor recalls hearing voices late at night, whispers that carried through the trees like prayer. A co-worker mentions Thomas's recent withdrawal, spending long hours working on something in the basement. The narrator cuts in. The Ridgways had become ghosts long before they disappeared. The traces of distance, the shadows in their smiles, all there if only someone had looked closely enough. Inside the Ridgway basement, investigators uncover something unusual. A portion of the concrete floor, recently broken and repoured. Beneath the surface, they find a small cache of notebooks and audio tapes labeled in Thomas Ridgway's handwriting. Duval plays one. His voice crackles through the static. They're coming closer every night. I can hear them under the house. The camera lingers on Duval's face as she listens, her expression frozen between disbelief and dread. The audio tapes reveal Thomas's growing paranoia. Nights spent awake, pacing, claiming to hear voices beneath the floorboards and in the forest beyond the house. He wasn't delusional, Eleanor writes in her journal. But whatever he heard, it started changing him. Duval reads the words aloud, her voice trembling slightly as she looks up at the empty Ridgeway home, the echo of the past thick in the air. The narrator reflects. Every haunting begins with someone refusing to believe what they feel. A week into the investigation, Duval calls a press conference. Reporters crowd the police station steps as she steps up to the microphone, the rain still falling. At this time, she says, "We are not ruling out foul play." Her voice wavers slightly on the last word. The narrator's voice follows her departure. The deeper the detectives searched for the Ridgeways, the more the case seemed to turn inward, into the dark spaces of fear, belief, and denial. A storm brews over the Ridgeway property as Detective Duval revisits the case files for the 5th time in 2 days. The voices from Thomas's tapes echo in her headphones, fragmented, desperate, occasionally pleading. "They whisper my name," he says. "They're not from here." The narrator continues, Thomas Ridgeway's recordings offered no evidence, only emotion. A descent captured in sound. Yet, beneath the static, investigators noticed something chilling, faint knocking patterns, as though someone was trapped just out of reach. Eleanor's journals begin to reveal the cracks beneath the family's facade. She writes of Thomas's sleepless nights, his fear of something moving beneath the house, his insistence on protecting them from unseen forces. She describes her growing isolation, how even her children began to whisper about the noises. "He built something down there." One entry reads, "A place. He said we'd be safe when it comes." The narrator's tone softens. Fear turns a home into a prison, faster than any crime. Detective Duval interviews Lila's best friend, who shares a secret message Lila sent days before the disappearance. "Dad's losing it," it reads. "He says we can't go outside anymore." The friend admits she dismissed it as a joke. Duval listens in silence. Sometimes, the narrator intones, the warnings hide in plain sight, but no one wants to believe madness until it's too late. Late that night, Duval and her team return to the Ridgeway basement. Using ground-penetrating radar, they detect a hollow chamber beneath the concrete slab. The silence as they break through is unbearable. A hidden stairwell descends into darkness. Duval's flashlight reveals an unfinished bunker. Food cans, blankets, and a radio still humming static. Thomas Ridgeway wasn't planning to leave. The narrator says grimly, "He was preparing to stay. He shouldn't ask or force what." Duval sits before the camera in the interview room, visibly shaken. "He believes something lived under that house," she says softly. "And I think he convinced them too." Her eyes shift downward, as if reliving what she saw in the bunker. The narrator concludes the act with quiet gravity. The Ridgeway disappearance was no longer a case of missing persons. It had become a study in fear. A family devoured not by what they saw, but by what they believed. The sun never truly rises the morning the search resumes. Mist clings to the ground like breath, and the forest hums with a low, oppressive silence. Detectives, officers, and volunteers move in a staggered line through the undergrowth. Then, a shout. Duval rushes forward, her boots sinking into the damp soil. Beneath a layer of pine needles lies a bundle wrapped in fabric. A torn bedsheet knotted tightly. Inside, they find fragments of burned wood, photographs, and strands of hair fused together by ash. The forest had kept their secrets, the narrator whispers, but even secrets rot when left too long in the dark. A deeper sweep of the forest reveals more Scattered among the trees are stones arranged in a perfect circle, each marked with a burned sigil. The team halts, unnerved by the precision. Duval studies the formation, eyes narrowing as she realizes its alignment mirrors the Ridgeway Properties layout. "It wasn't random," she says quietly. "Someone built this, and they wanted it found." The narrator's tone hardens. Every ritual begins with faith. Every tragedy with belief. Forensics return their analysis. Traces of human ash in the soil, though inconclusive in identity. Meanwhile, Eleanor's final journal entries reveal growing fear. "He doesn't sleep anymore," she wrote. "He keeps saying they're calling us. He hears them in the trees." Duval reads these lines aloud, her voice barely audible. The narrator reflects. When fear becomes doctrine, reason is the first to die. Later that night, Duval revisits the forest site alone. Her flashlight beam cuts through the mist, illuminating the circle of stones. The air feels heavier here, like the ground itself remembers what happened. She kneels, tracing her fingers along one of the symbols. Beneath the soil, something glints, a buried photo frame, half melted by fire. The narrator murmurs, "The truth isn't buried in the earth." It waits, patient, beneath our denial. The discovery transforms the investigation into something else, no longer a search but an excavation of madness. Duval stands before her superior officers, insisting the family didn't simply vanish, but enacted something ritualistic. Her words meet silence, disbelief, bureaucracy. The narrator's tone sharpens. The hardest truth to face isn't what happened to them. It's what they believed they were escaping. Duval glances at the evidence board, her reflection fractured among their faces. "They weren't running from someone," she says quietly. "They were following him." The case begins to consume Detective Duval. She plays the Ridgeway tapes over and over, searching for patterns, anything to make sense of the static. "They come when it rains," Thomas's voice repeats, his tone breaking on the last word. Duval starts hearing faint sounds in her own home. Footsteps above her ceiling. Whispers beneath the hum of her refrigerator. "It's just exhaustion," she tells herself. The narrator's voice enters like a shadow. Every investigator reaches a point where the case stops being evidence and starts being reflection. Duval returns to the Ridgeway house in the dead of night, unable to sleep. Her flashlight beam sweeps across empty walls, illuminating dust and decay. "I needed to feel the air they breathed," she confides in a recorded memo, "to understand why this place still feels alive." As she moves through the hallway, a sound rises, faint, knocking, steady, rhythmic, coming from beneath the floor. The narrator's voice drops to a whisper. Some answers shouldn't be pursued in silence. At the precinct, Duval begins studying the geography of the Ridgeway neighborhood, overlaying Thomas's notes with local history. To her surprise, she discovers 3 older missing person cases from the same forest line. All families, all vanished without trace. Their homes form a triangle on the map with the Ridgeway property at its center. "Coincidence?" her partner says. "Pattern," she replies. The narrator observes, sometimes the truth arranges itself in shapes too precise to ignore. Unable to shake the feeling she's being followed, Duval reviews surveillance from the Ridgeway neighborhood. In one grainy clip recorded weeks after the disappearance, a flicker of light appears in the Ridgeway living room window. Faint, but unmistakable. The timestamp reads, November 3rd. "The power was cut to that house a month ago," the technician mutters. Duval leans closer to the monitor. In the static for just a second, 4 silhouettes seem to stand together in the living room. Duval begins recording her own thoughts, just as Thomas once did. "I used to think cases like this had answers," she says into her recorder. "But maybe it's not about what happened. Maybe it's about what we're willing to see." Her voice trembles as she admits she's been dreaming of the Ridgeways, standing in their yard, smiling at her, their eyes hollow and waiting. The narrator closes the act with quiet inevitability. Every investigator becomes part of the story they chase. Duval was no longer watching the Ridgeways. The Ridgeways were watching her. The morning fog lingers heavy over the Ridgeway property as technicians finally unseal the lower chamber discovered beneath the bunker. The space smells of metal and mold, an underground room smaller than expected. Walls covered with faded newspaper clippings about natural disasters and missing persons. On a rickety desk sits a camcorder, its battery long dead, a final tape labeled, "For them." The narrator's tone is measured but grim. Thomas Ridgway left one final message, not to the world, but to those he took with him. The footage begins with static, then a dim view of Thomas's face, gaunt and trembling. "If you're watching this," he whispers, "it means I failed to keep them safe." His eyes dart toward the camera as distant knocking echoes from somewhere behind him. "It's not madness," he insists. "It's coming from below." He turns the camera toward the floor, the lens capturing what appears to be movement in the soil. "They want us together," he mutters, before the screen cuts to black. The narrator's voice lowers. The camera outlived its witness. Forensics confirm the Ridgeways were all in the bunker days before their disappearance. Fingerprints, clothing fibers, even half-eaten food confirm they lived underground temporarily. But there's no sign of how they left, or where they went. Duval studies the final frames of the tape repeatedly, catching what appears to be a hand, not Thomas's, pulling at the camera before it cuts. "If they were never found," she mutters, "then maybe they never left." The narrator reflects. Sometimes the evidence doesn't lead to truth. It leads to myth. Later that night, Duval plays the recording again. Not for analysis, but to listen to what lies beneath the words. Between Thomas's sentences, faint sounds emerge. Distant breathing. The shuffle of fabric. A single word whispered by Eleanor. Slowed down. It becomes clear. "Stay!" The narrator's voice chills the air. It was not a plea. It was an ambiguity on the air. Honor why. It World turns off the lights and sits in silence, unable to tell if the sound still echoes in the room or only in her mind. Detective Duval presents her final report to the department. Officially, the Ridgway case is ruled unresolved disappearance with elements of psychological delusion. But privately, her notes tell another story. One she refuses to submit. She drives back to the Ridgway property at dusk, the camera following her silhouette through the thinning fog. Standing at the tree line, she whispers, "If you can hear me, I believe you." The wind answers with a soft echo, the sound of children laughing in the distance. The narrator closes. Truth was never meant to be comforting. Sometimes it's only meant to be heard. Weeks later, the Ridgway property stands condemned. Bulldozers idle in the yard while officers secure the perimeter. Detective Duval watches from her car, her face pale and unreadable. "Some houses don't hold memories," the narrator begins. "They hold echoes." The camera lingers as the first wall crumbles. Dust and insulation billowing outward like breath. Beneath the collapsing frame, something metallic clinks. Workers pause. Buried in the debris lies a small, mud-caked camcorder, one not cataloged before. Duval steps out, eyes narrowing. "One last voice," she murmurs. At the lab, technicians restore the damaged footage. It's shaky, handheld, clearly not filmed by Thomas. A child's voice narrates softly. "Mom says we're safe now. Dad says the noise is gone." The camera turns toward Eleanor, her expression calm but distant, like someone rehearsing peace. Then the image distorts. The child's breathing quickens. The last thing captured is a sudden movement, a hand covering the lens, and then darkness. Whoever filmed it, the narrator says, wanted the world to believe it ended quietly. The footage is archived. The Ridgway case is officially closed, but Duval can't let it go. She visits the site one last time, now an empty lot bordered by scorched trees. She sets a single photograph, the family portrait once found on the living room floor, onto the ground. We search for monsters, she whispers. And sometimes we only find mirrors. The narrator's tone turns elegiac. What remained of the Ridgways wasn't horror. It was faith, misplaced but pure. They believed in something beyond fear, and it took them. In the documentary's closing moments, Duval gives her final interview. Her voice is steady, but carries the weight of everything left unsaid. I used to think evil was something you could see, she says. But maybe it's quieter than that. Maybe it just waits until someone listens. She pauses, glancing at the camera. They weren't taken, they followed. The frame lingers on her face before fading to black, replaced by the sound of distant wind and the soft murmur of children's laughter. The screen fades to grainy recovered footage, a handheld camera swaying through the Ridgway woods at night. The voice behind the lens is Eleanor's. We never left, she whispers softly, as if speaking from between worlds. The camera pans up toward the treetops, where faint lights shimmer like distant stars. Then, silence. The narrator's final words linger. Disappearance is never the end. It's a doorway, and sometimes the ones who step through don't intend to return.